Le Pré Catelan is one of the most magnificent and luxurious restaurants in Paris. The establishment has 3 Michelin stars and serves a decadent 12-course tasting menu, but it doesn't come cheap, costing over $500. Some of the food I had that night proved to be among the best that I've ever had, but unfortunately, some things fell a bit short. Nevertheless, my dinner at Le Pré Catelan was unforgettable.
Today, once again, I'm clearly not in Paris, France, but back home in New York City. The thing is, I never got to film a sort of introduction and conclusion to my experience at Le Pré Catelan. And that was a very special and memorable experience indeed. So before I took my trip to Paris, I knew that I wanted to go to some good restaurants, and I wanted to go to one very special restaurant, a 3 Michelin-starred restaurant. There are a number of incredible 3 Michelin-starred restaurants in Paris, and frankly, I would have been happy with going to any one of them. I chose Le Pré Catelan not only because it sounded incredible, but because out of the 3-star options, it was the most affordable. Now, having said that, a lot of the 3 stars in Paris do offer some reasonably priced lunch options, but I wanted to go to a place where I can get the full tasting menu and the full experience. And that's what I got from Le Pré Catelan, although it still wasn't cheap. I spent over $500 just on the food. However, it's not every day that I'm in Paris, and I wanted to make the most of it. I can always save money when I come back home. So that is what I did, and the result was a very memorable meal. But it wasn't perfect. Frankly, I had dishes that night that just didn't really speak to me and I found somewhat questionable. Plus, at one point, the service completely collapsed. Now, on the flip side, I literally had some of the best food of my entire life. So with that being said, this was my dinner at Le Pré Catelan.
I woke up that day in Paris feeling good. The sickness that plagued me beforehand was gone, and I was eager for my meal at Le Pré Catelan. Before that, however, I enjoyed my time in the city. I first checked out the art at the Bois de Boulogne Museum. For lunch, I had an enjoyable burger at a location of Blend. After that, I got some much-needed coffee, but during all that time, Le Pré Catelan was on my mind. Finally, I made my way to the restaurant, which is located deep within the Bois de Boulogne. The site is one of the largest parks in Paris. In fact, the area is 2.5 times the size of New York City's Central Park and is practically a small forest. There are a number of attractions within the Bois de Boulogne, including the Fondation Louis Vuitton, where I was actually at the other day, where I saw an excellent exhibition of the artist Gerhard Richter. At night, however, I was soon to discover that the Bois de Boulogne is a very different place. Since I had the time, I thought that I would walk from the subway to the restaurant. In hindsight, that wasn't the best idea. I discovered that some nefarious activities occur within the park at night, but it was no big deal. I was more so worried about getting mud on my shoes because at points I could barely see a thing. Thankfully, I eventually made it to Le Pré Catelan in one piece and with fairly clean shoes. The restaurant has a long history that extends all the way back to 1905. In that year, the city of Paris commissioned architect Guillaume Tronchet to build a grand casino restaurant. While the casino never came to be, the restaurant by 1908 was one of the most fashionable spots in Paris. Over the decades, management of the establishment changed hands a number of times, but it was in 1997 that Le Pré Catelan truly began the road to gastronomic glory with the arrival of chef Frédéric Anton. With Anton at the helm, he first earned 1 star, then 2, and finally 3 Michelin stars for Le Pré Catelan in 2007. The restaurant also achieved a nearly perfect score from Go and Mio. Besides Le Pré Catelan, Chef Anton is well known for his other restaurant, the 2 Michelin-starred Le Jules Verne, which is housed atop one of the world's most iconic structures, the Eiffel Tower. In addition, Chef Anton has appeared on a number of shows, most notably the French version of MasterChef. To put it simply, I couldn't have been more excited for my meal at Le Pré Catelan. It was to be the culinary highlight of my trip. I stepped into the restaurant right when it opened at 7 p.m. for my reservation. After checking in, things weren't quite ready yet, so I was ushered into a small but pleasant waiting area, but soon enough I was escorted into the dining room, and it was magnificent. I I've had the privilege of dining in many beautiful restaurants across the world, but Le Pré Catelan proved to be among the most stunning. The dining room was spacious and elegant, with soaring ceilings, glittering chandeliers, and romantic candles flickering on every table. Every inch of the dining room screamed luxury and class. When you think of what a 3 Michelin-starred restaurant looks like, a place like Le Pré Catelan comes to mind. With such a classy space, you would think that there would be a dress code, and there is one indeed, but it's not too strict. Basically, if you're not wearing swim trunks, you'll be good. I, along with most of the male diners, wore a suit. After settling in, I began to look over the menu. For dinner, there are 2 options. There's the full 12-course tasting menu for 435 euros and a smaller 9-course tasting menu for 365 euros. The dishes with the asterisk beside them are the courses that are included with the 9-course tasting menu. The ones without are the additional dishes that are a part of the 12-course tasting. I, along with what seemed like every table in the restaurant, went with the 12-course selection. In addition, for lunch, the restaurant serves an abbreviated 5-course menu for 195 euros. Next, I perused the wine list, which was accessible via a tablet. There were some fine bottles on offer, but I went with the wine by the glass route. I ended up choosing a glass of the 2020 Cola Ruprecht Pinot Noir. The wine was nice. It was light and delicate and easy to drink. It also had an earthy edge to it, which made it interesting. In addition to my beverage, I was also presented with the first bite of the meal. It was an amuse. It was a sort of creamy tart. Unfortunately, I can't recall exactly what the tart consisted of, but it was indeed a pleasurable bite and a nice start to my dinner. Around the same time that I received the tart, I was also given bread and butter. Even though bread may be a common food staple, good bread is a precious thing, and that was some ridiculously good bread. It was extraordinary. First off, it was warm and fresh and texturally on point with a good crisp and a fluffy interior. The flavor was on the money as well, but the butter took it to another level. That butter was truly top tier, and I loved how it was stamped with a Pré Catelan label. I should also point out that about midway through my meal, the restaurant replaced my bread serving with another, even though I didn't finish my first. In some respects, I thought that was unnecessary, but fresh warm bread is indeed better. Soon enough, I was presented with the first official course of the meal, and my first thought was, wow, I was at a 3 Michelin-starred restaurant alright. The dish consisted of sea urchin as a jelly, celery cream, and caviar. The amount of precision that went into constructing that course is simply incredible. I couldn't wait to take my first bite, and I wasn't disappointed. That was an excellent dish. The sea urchin and caviar flavors were strong and very concentrated. Now, those were familiar flavors, but sea urchin and caviar are great to begin with, and the artful presentation of that course made it special. Although, it really was a thin layer of jelly, which made it difficult to get a good spoonful of the creation. Nevertheless, I still appreciated that dish. Next up was la rouille, which was basically a fish soup consisting of botarga. Flavor-wise, it was tasty. It was deep and rich, but that course unfortunately just didn't do it for me. First off, the portion was so small, it was a struggle to get a spoonful. It felt like I was finishing up the sauce of a much larger dish, but no, that was the entire dish. Usually, when I've had soup and the like in a tasting menu format, it's typically served in a more narrow vessel so I can get a good spoonful, or I'm instructed to simply drink it. With that course, I felt that a pipette should have been given to me alongside the spoon. Now, don't get me wrong, the dish still tasted good, but it was just too simplistic for me, and I felt it could have been better.
Oh, it's spectacular.
Oh, yeah.
Next, I was presented with a slightly warmed lobster course with rosemary butter. That was a wonderful lobster. It was perfectly cooked and of a great quality. The rosemary butter sauce was nice as well and had a slight earthiness to it. Overall, that was a good dish, and I was thoroughly enjoying my meal so far. The courses came out at a consistent pace, and just being in that spectacular dining room in the middle of the Bois de Boulogne made me feel good. Following the lobster was one of my favorite courses of the night, although it didn't look like much. Le Pré Catelan definitely takes a minimalist approach when it comes to dish construction and presentation. If that dish was any more minimal, I would have been presented with an empty bowl. That was the crab course with dashi, hot jelly, and fennel cream, and it was extraordinary. The course was literal fireworks in my mouth. The crab flavor was so strong and powerful, combined with the creaminess of the creation, it was perfect. Ironically, the simplest looking dish of the night had the most dramatic flavor, but the next course was certainly no slouch in that department. I was presented with one of the signature dishes of the restaurant, the langoustine ravioli with duck foie gras and a thin gold jelly, which I thought had a good look to it. It only took a single bite to realize why that dish is a signature of Le Pré Catelan. It was spectacular. The langoustines were plump, rich, and flavorful. The foamy sauce cradling the ravioli added even more richness and umami to the creation. In summation, I loved that course. It was a worthy signature dish indeed. Next was the cod in the fashion of a soft brondad. A brondad is traditionally mashed salt cod mixed with olive oil, garlic, and potatoes. While the presentation may have once again been minimal, the flavor was strong and a true pleasure to eat. However, I don't think a brondad is the best type of course for a tasting menu. Typically, it's nice to get a big scoop of the mixture and plop it on a nice slice of bread. At Le Pré Catelan, however, it was a challenge just to get a spoonful of the brondad. Nevertheless, the flavor was still fantastic, and it was still an enjoyable dish. Next up was my favorite course of the night.
Oh, wow.
So you continue with the salmon, confit with the olive oil, smoked with cherrywood tree. On the side we'll have a wasabi emulsion and sesame seeds.
When that salmon dish was revealed to me, the cherrywood tree smoke gave off the most heavenly aroma, which increased my excitement to try that course tenfold. The second my knife cut through that fish, I knew that I was in for something special. That was unequivocally one of the best seafood dishes that I've ever had. It was a masterpiece. The salmon was so light and delicate, but combined with that smooth and perfectly balanced wasabi emulsion, it felt like all my dreams came true at once. It was perfect. That dish was a triumph. However, all good things come to an end, but there was still a decent amount of the menu to go. Next, I was presented with a simple but luxurious creation of a champagne sorbet topped with caviar. That was a nice, refreshing treat, combining salty and sweet. Champagne and caviar are classic pairings indeed. However, the cool temperature of the sorbet sort of nullified the flavor of the caviar a bit. I still enjoyed eating that creation though, but to me it's not the best way to enjoy the flavors of caviar and champagne. The best caviar dishes that I've had are the ones that don't distract from the flavor of the caviar. Rather, the other components of a dish should complement the caviar rather than overshadow it. And unfortunately, that is kind of what the sorbet did. Following the caviar dish was the meat course. The dish consisted of squab along with poached dates and crunchy semolina. The squab had an interesting look to it. I couldn't get over the fact that it kind of looked like a tongue, but I was still eager to try it. I love squab. Now that was a fine dish. The meat was perfectly cooked, and the crunchy semolina coating on the squab was definitely an interesting textural component. The sauce was on the mark as well, as it imparted a nice sweet flavor to the savory meat. Overall, that was a satisfying dish. Following the squab was the cheese course. It consisted of a steamed soufflé with Comté cheese. The course felt light, but also rich and bold at the same time. That soufflé was texturally perfect as my spoon glided right through it. I love cheese and I always appreciate a cheese course. I really wish that the course was more common in the US, but that dish certainly did the trick for me. Next wasn't an official course, but rather a palate cleanser to transition to dessert. It was a dill sorbet, which is a pretty bold flavor for a palate cleanser, but I always appreciate risk-taking and unique offerings when it comes to food. The sorbet was good, but it was very dill forward. If you're not a fan of dill, that palate cleanser is probably not for you. I happen to love dill, but even for me, it wouldn't be my first choice as a flavor for a palate cleanser. Nevertheless, I still appreciated the offering. Then it was on to the first dessert, the pollen with sabli and honey ice cream. That was a phenomenal course. The flavors were nicely balanced, it wasn't too sweet, and there were a number of different and satisfying textures to the dish. I loved it. Plus, I appreciated the fact that I could get a full, satisfying spoonful of the creation, which wasn't quite the case with a few of the past dishes. After finishing, it was sadly on to the final course, which was simple, but a good one. It was a bitter cacao pie with a side of vanilla ice cream. Simply put, that was the perfect chocolate pie. The chocolate flavor was strong, but the texture was light and smooth. The vanilla ice cream, as expected, proved to be a nice contrast to the bitterness of the chocolate. Of course, I wish that there was more ice cream, but I was overall incredibly satisfied with that dessert. To conclude my experience at Pré Catelan, I was given a few delightful final bites. In summation, I had a great time at the restaurant. It's truly a special place on multiple fronts. However, I felt that some courses just fell a little short for a variety of reasons, but at the end of the day, everything still tasted good. Plus, the service was excellent, except at the very end of my meal. When I finished the petit fours, my plate was cleared and I waited for my bill, but no one ever came to my table. Eventually, I flagged down a server and requested the check, but once again, I waited a great deal of time and I was starting to get annoyed and it was getting late. Then I saw the individual I requested the bill from present a bill to another table before me, which was about 15 minutes after I made my request. The whole process of getting my bill took around a half hour, which I was a bit upset about. Although I felt that it was more so the result of an accidental oversight. It happens. In terms of the bill, which had to have been one of the fanciest receipts that I ever received, it totaled to 471 euros. Now online, it does say that service is included, which is why I didn't tip. With the conversion rate of that particular day, I spent a total of $543.86, which equated to be the costliest dinner that I've ever had. Regarding the journey back to my hotel, I wisely took an Uber. It was one hell of a night.
So that was a bit of a mixed bag. Now, having said that, it was largely a positive experience. I mean, some of the food that I had that night were literally some of the best things that I ever ate. But having said that, it's just hard to overlook some of the shortcomings, especially when I pay that much money. When a place has 3 Michelin stars, you tend to have certain expectations, and some of those expectations weren't met. As a whole, I just thought that the menu lacked a bit of balance. I mean, I'm a huge carnivore, but I would have welcomed some vegetables. Plus, some of those dishes just didn't really feel like complete courses. I mean, that one dish just literally felt like a very tasty sauce with some stuff. Regarding the service and hospitality, it was fantastic up until the very end. The fact that I had to wait that long for my bill, I'm sure it wasn't intentional, but it was still frustrating nevertheless. Things like that you just don't expect to happen in a 3 Michelin starred restaurant. Now, despite those issues, I still largely had a great time. That salmon course was literally the best dish I had in 2025. In fact, that was one of the greatest things I ever ate. Plain and simple, it was a masterpiece. Plus that crab course, oh, that was heavenly too. And I loved that dining room too. That was without a doubt one of the most spectacular rooms that I've ever had the privilege to have a meal in. So overall, I feel like the positives of my experience far outweigh the negatives. Now, I would probably recommend looking towards the other 3 Michelin starred places in Paris as opposed to Pré Catelan, but I still think it's a special place. And I would absolutely love to return to Pré Catelan one day. Overall, my trip to Paris was fantastic. Even though I was sick for half the time I was there, I made some great memories, had some amazing meals, and I cannot wait to return to that special place.